So who's in the waiting room? You have three.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
There was one more in the waiting room, Joe.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm steering all the IT for this thing, so I apologize that we are late. It's
That's all right.
my
Is that
fault.
Marinda?
Not there.
No, that's Dr. Wally.
All right, great. So it is 2:38. I will call this meeting of the City of Norwich Health Equity Committee to order. We will do a roll call. So I will start with the individuals in the room. Patrick.
Here.
Kathy.
Here.
Bridget.
Here.
Sheila.
Here.
Kate.
Here. Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Here.
Great. Joe Zuzel. I am present. Michael Steinmetz.
I'm here on behalf of Missy Myers.
Perfect. Dr. McLean.
Here.
And Dr. Wally.
Here.
Perfect. So Happy New Year to everyone. If I haven't said Happy New Year to you, it's nice to see everyone here. We have quite the quorum today. So that gives me a lot of hope and positivity for the new year and the work that we're trying to do. I'm just going to read the mission real quick: to eliminate disparities and health outcomes for all people in the city of Norwich due to all forms of current and historical systemic oppression, injustice, and discrimination. So we've done the call to order, we've done attendance. We unfortunately do not have minutes from the December meeting. There was sort of a scheduling mix up with that, but we will have the minutes for us to approve by next meeting. And that will bring us speedily into our agenda item number 4. So I think I've made up for those 9 minutes already. And that would be chair updates.
She's supposed to be online. But I don't see her. I don't see her waiting in the waiting room.
Well, let me know if anybody pops up and I can try to.
So can you pull the agenda up?
And it's recording, so someone can at least listen back, right?
Yep, she'll see this recording and can take notes.
Yeah, that agenda trick's going to be a little bit tricky.
That's okay. That's
All
right.
right. But I have one here. So updates. So chair updates. So I wanted to discuss basically sort of have a debrief from our last meeting when we were talking about with Darrell Wilson, Representative Wilson, about the resolutions. And we asked a lot of really interesting points about that. I know that all of us around the table and Zoom have sort of questioned, what is our role when it comes to these resolutions? What are we trying to do as organizations? What are we trying to do for the city? And I think that, the information that he was able to provide was very helpful in terms of sort of our direction and our guidance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. I think we have some clear goals and some tasks moving forward. And I think that that's really going to help us out. I think in the beginning, when we were first tasked with this, we looked at the resolution as these are specific things that we need to achieve. This is what is tasked to us. And the way Darrell is really explaining it is that these are ideas that are proposed for us as subject matter experts to see how we feel about them. Are they relevant? Are they things that we can work on? To what extent will we work on them? Are there things that can be addressed now as low-hanging fruit? Are there things that need to be looked at years down the road? And so that kind of gave me a lot of, I guess, a feeling of understanding, I guess, because there were so many and so intense that it was really a hard thing for us to sort of look at. So in sharing this, I think the way that we're going to look at this to navigate is really sort of looking inward first to what we are doing as organizations and using that as our map, as our plan, because we are tasked with developing an equity plan for the city of Norwich in terms of really saying, hey, this is what best practice looks like. This is what we're already doing. This is how we're partnering. These are the things that we address through the work that we're already doing, and compiling it in such a way that we can give that information to the city for them to be able to say, okay, how is it that we can kind of reflect on this on our own? And I think that says a lot of the things that we've had conversations about in the past in some of these meetings. You know, we've talked about the Eastern Connecticut Health Collaborative, for example. There's a lot of work that gets done there. We talk about our community health departments, our FQHCs, or what the health district is doing in the community, how we've partnered through vaccine equity, how we partner through our mobile health hubs, right? What's the work that's being done that we know about, but maybe at that municipal level is not necessarily focused on or even understood? And how can we chunk it together in manageable segments in what looks like an equity plan so that we're really pulling the city into the work that we do every day? And we provide that sort of reflection. So I kind of wanted to level set there with chair updates, and I want to open it up for discussion because I think this really gives us a place to aim for, whereas before there was a real lot that we were trying to balance in different ways. Kind of see if other individuals pulled something different from Representative Wilson's conversation, how we feel about this sort of direction. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Okay, I'll go. So I think honestly, you said understanding, I feel relief.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was a lot to bite off, right? And then we subdivided it into different groups and we broke off into different committees to address these different things. And I think it's nice to know that the vision at the end, like that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and that's a plan, right? And, you know, speaking for the city's role in this, my take on how things transpired was that there's a gap in communication. There's a gap in having a liaison between the city and the work you do and the work other nonprofits do in my, you know, social services vision. And so to that end, our departments are developing our budgets right now. And one of the things I was tasked with was using municipal tax dollars for cannabis. And so my plan for that money is to hire a community engagement coordinator who would fulfill this role and close some of those gaps. So help with social media marketing, outreach, going to events, getting the work you guys are doing into the underserved populations that need more support. One of the things we're doing for the Norwich Opioid Task Force next week, 9 a.m. to Cliff Street. Everybody should come. The task force is going to be actually mapping all of the overdoses in Norwich over the past few months, maybe even a year. It looks like somebody's waiting to be let into.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so we're going to be highlighting the opioid overdoses with identified services in Norwich to see if the services are clustered in a way that's separate from where the overdoses are clustered and so on. See where maybe more services need to be and strategize around that. And Congressman Courtney is going to be there too. So there's a lot of movement in that direction, and identifying those service deserts, if you will help fuel the work that this community engagement coordinator liaison of sorts is doing. So there's movement in that direction from my end anyway.
I will second your relief motion as well. Yes.
So can I ask, transitioning from what you just said to Bridget? Before you leave out here, because I feel like we've been talking about this budget for when we first set up our first diversity committee in about 2005, 2006. So this is almost 20 years that Bridget and I have been trying to work on the city side. Will you be able to, because I don't know if we'll be far enough along, and if you will have your person who's going to head up HR in place at the time, will you be able to at least write us some strategies for the internal city process?
For recruitment or?
Just not even just recruitment, not just recruitment. I mean, I'll tell you the training from my involvement with boards and commissions, we don't get any training. Like we were told, we were like, just take the ethics training. I had that once. and never again is it ever talked about. There's never any talk about like on the school construction. I'm using these as examples on the school building construction. There's never any talk about what is our commitment to hiring, to looking at equity and inclusion in the hiring process through the purchasing office, whether it's the school purchasing offices or the city side. So there's training, there's purchasing, there's boards and commissions that are also, we forget about the work they do. Some of those committees are mandated, like Commission on the City Plan has, often the city refers, this has to be referred to the Commission on the City Plan, a project before it comes back. And then there's just your internal process of what each department should be doing to address some of these issues as well. So I'm hoping, because you probably, of all the people I can think of that has the knowledge, historical knowledge, but just the knowledge to be able to leave us with some of those strategies or some of those areas that, that the city should be looking into. Should you not be your admin, continue into the internal process of the city. So I'm glad to hear you're looking at internal, external. But my real concern is the internal of the city. That connection in 20 years is not, to me, been accomplished where I even feel like we've moved the needle. In some departments, yes, but as a city, no.
Yeah. So, and I think, it's a really interesting point because Kate, your department is very close to the community, engages in a lot of this work as it is, but we're really tasked with the city of Norwich as a whole, right? So we're looking at the entire city, and that's where, even just to know historically what has been done, what has been suggested, that's going to be sort of a sneak peek into our next agenda item, is I really want us as a group to discuss what are our sort of overarching categories that we're going to provide information on what we do as organizations. So is it trainings? Is it programs? Is it communication? And then so what is currently being done, right? What has been suggested? And then once we level set what kind of things are happening, that can be developed into a plan to move forward. So even just knowing that you have that historical knowledge is fantastic, because we'll be able to say, okay, these are things that we've tried, didn't work. These are things that are in the works. These are things that we're currently doing. But we're going to look in the mirror for all of us to say, okay, what are those categories that we want to report out on? Because to Kate's point, it is that gap in communication, right? And I think that's a real great way for us to understand why these resolutions are in place, right? We all agree with a lot of the resolutions, but it's really the cause. Like, why are we put together at this table? What's our end game? Other questions, discussions about this pivot, or I guess focus, we'll call it. It's not even really a pivot. It's more of like a streamline, I guess.
Yeah, the only comment I have over this is, we have a job that has been tasked by the city. The city's internal politics and causes, the city needs to deal with that. And I think our focus should not be diverted with that. So if this committee is tasked with one focused agenda thing to do, I think that's what we should be focused on.
Right. And I think that helps us, Dr. Walia, too, because it's up to us to put forward the great work that we do. It's up to us to put forward the lessons we've learned, our best practices, to use a phrase. Then the city, they decide what they do with that, right?
Correct.
So we create the plan. We're not necessarily, and like that kind of threw me off with the resolutions too, when it talks about data gathering. We're all sitting in here talking about how we're going to do yet again more data gathering. Well, just between the people sitting at this table and online, we've probably done more data gathering like in the last 3 years than we could and paid for it too. So it's not about us doing the data gathering. It's about us putting it out there how we did it, how we made sure that it was equitable,
Correct.
how we shared that information. So really, this committee, we are the subject matter experts. We are the ones who kind of gets the good stuff together, shows it to the city and says, this is what we recommend. How the city moves forward for that, to Dr. Wally's point, that's great. If they want to engage in the way that, Kate's department is planning on doing that, wonderful. But really it's, we're tasked with the plan. And that's what it says for us to do. All great points. Other questions, concerns about this?
I think the communication piece is huge and at kind of the core of everything, because we also all know what we do. And there is a lot of overlap in what we do, but there's a lot of things that I probably don't know about the other people on this thing and what they do, and the other organizations that are a part of this. So I know I need to educate myself more on what, you got a million programs going on. You guys have a lot, and it's impressive, but it's a lot, and I want to make sure we know. And
That's just youth, family, and recreation too. That's just one of
Exactly.
my 3 divisions.
right,
Right.
and the prevention council. I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
So what we're trying to do, even at the library at the moment, is kind of be a hub for information, because we get people in there, especially after hours and everything. We want to set up online and in person, like even just QR codes. Almost everybody has a phone now. Even the homeless people have phones sometimes. So contact information that we can even do slight blurbs on what people are doing, and it will educate us and our patrons about what is out there for them, and try to get away from lingo, because we all use a lot of jargon and things like that. So I think even that, if the ultimate goal is to get everybody access to healthcare, we need to speak in languages that they speak. Those are, and obviously cultural languages, but even not jargon. So I think first, like, make sure we all know what each other is doing, and then make sure we can express to the public what we're doing. I think sometimes, even just in the short time I've been in this role, I'm like, oh, they do this, oh, and they do that, oh, and they do that. I mean, there's a lot of overlap, and in some instances overlap, but still waiting lists to get into programs. So that's kind of where I am, if that makes sense. Like, make sure we all know what each other is doing before we can even gather a plan, because if we're going to put it out to the city council and the public, we got to know what we're talking about too, and then we all have the same kind of messaging going out.
I think you bring up a very good point.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. Yep.
You
Go ahead,
do-
Dr. Wally.
Yeah, I was just saying that's an excellent point you bring up, and that's a very positive byproduct of this committee, that
Correct.
you are the eyes and ears for the community. I mean, the city of Norwich with its various departments are there for the community, and you should know what services we as agencies within the committee provide. So absolutely, that's an important byproduct that will come out that you'll use. I mean, we go out and we market ourselves to the best way we can, but for the common man to get that knowledge is through you guys, and that's important.
And I think, Kathy, you bring up a really good point. So those future partnerships, right? Looking at how we're duplicating things, looking at how we can supplement and work together. Like, we're already doing that through the collaborative. We do that through a lot of different partnerships. That will be great down the line. But for now, our focus is that plan and where we go. So not saying that putting this plan together won't have other advantages as we move forward. It will. But really, that's for us outside of this meeting when we're doing that work, or if the city says, hey, we'd like to get involved, how do we pull this all together? We have to really make sure that our focus is narrow about saying, look, this is what we do, right? This is what we think is best practices moving forward, and this is how we think you could probably get there. And I think that will be great for all of us, because then we will also be able to understand more intimately everybody's sort of workflow in our own businesses, which will inevitably help us. I agree with you.
It was interesting because I had my meeting with my board chairman today to talk about my evaluation. And one of the questions was, how do you evaluate whether the programs you do in each of the towns is effective? Is it worth your while? Or you take the same 3 staff, you go to an event with 3 people, you go to an event with 100 people in Norwich. Why are you doing that event with 3 people and not just sticking to the event in Norwich? And I'll say, but Norwich may have 5 different agencies at that same event doing similar work. And we may be the only one if the thing in Basel or the thing in.
Correct.
So we also, that's part of the collaboration is seeing if we're duplicating services. Maybe a lot of the programs we run, we're concerned we're gonna lose because, you know, with the ARPA money going away and a lot of the COVID money going away, well, those activities need to go away. So am I informing this group in advance to say some of those programs that we've been doing that have been really valuable to the city may not be there in 2 years. So how do you either help me to continue those, or how do I find somebody else who can continue that work if we can't? So I think that's making sure that the city receives the same level of service they've been getting. And it's up to us as agencies to be able to figure out how we can help each other make sure that happens.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that's a great point because like I said, eventually we will transition into coming up with the buckets that we're looking to capture. But that's a really interesting thing too, because we're all not safe from budget cuts or resource dwindle or what have you. So perhaps there is a way that even in our equity plan for the city, we really incorporate a lot of those programs that we're not able to sort of stand up as we did before. And maybe that is the gap that the city could look to fill. So those are things that we can strategize as we move forward with the plan and kind of see what it looks like. But I think those are all important things to keep in mind because grants run out, right? Resources run out, things change.
And budget cuts happen, so where's
Exactly.
the value in different programs? I mean, if you had to cut senior services or recreation, which one
Sheila
goes
wouldn't
first?
do
Yeah,
that
those
to
things.
us.
But those are the things I'm talking about. Sometimes those hard decisions have to be made and how to
Yeah.
figure out where those priorities are so we can
Correct.
advocate. So if the
Correct.
library says, I'm about to lose 3 people to share in my budget,
Correct.
do we say, well, we should help you figure that out because or support you in trying to get those positions to be saved because.
And that's where we can become a tool in our report out, right? We're reporting out to the town council frequently with this meeting in our
Again,
equity
this group,
plan.
maybe we just alert the city to the fact something is happening that may affect our plan. The city has to figure out how they're gonna resolve that problem.
I wanna change that just a little bit. I want you to transition because something Kate said that I think is missing at the table because everybody's focused on this reevaluation of the city. But there is money coming into the city that has not been earmarked. It's new revenue with a specific purpose. Okay, now my understanding is the cannabis revenue money is not at the projected level that, 2 years ago, that they thought it may be. But the cannabis business is here. It's not whether I supported it or not, it's here. There's revenue that's gonna come back to the city. The very people that we're talking about who have been affected and impacted, whether it's the war on drugs, the cannabis, the formerly incarcerated, or just the families who are lacking in, are the most vulnerable when it comes to health and health equity. That money should not be viewed by the city as free money to take care of reducing the mildew. We should have a plan we should have a plan to say to John Salomon, okay, I don't care if you get 200,000 this year and then maybe 400,000 next year. It should have a plan attached to it.
Great.
Okay, and that's where I'm saying, looking at not just how the city's gonna do externally, but the city needs to buy in internally to this. Because that's the only way then you make sure that when the resources are there, and this is supposed to be guaranteed money coming to the city, it's like the bottle bill. That money comes into the city. Is it going to what it's supposed to go to? So that's really where my goal would be to this group. By April, we have some type of plan, not nuts and bolts, but some type of overview in that 6-month report we have to give to the city. It aligns itself with the budget process. So they have some direction, and I know I'm going to have to engage with my colleagues around the table, but hopefully John would take what we give him, incorporate what he's willing to fight for into that. Because it really should be coming out of his office, and not the other way around.
Great.
Okay.
Other questions, concerns? All right, so moving forward in the spirit of us focused on this sort of overarching goal and idea, we don't have a guest speaker this week, but does anyone have suggestions for guest speaker? I'll entertain guest speakers.
And I just, I had invited Senator Austin and State Representative Wilson. I can't, State Representative Wilson didn't confirm with me, but I think Kathy broke her foot
Oh,
over the weekend, which is, I know they had planned on attending. He didn't confirm. He called me last night and said, I think she broke her foot.
mm,
So, you know, that, so at a future date, hopefully
yes, that
to
would be
get
great.
her, here, because I did send out the report to everyone that Kathy had sent me
Mhm.
from the state committee that's doing similar work to what we're doing.
Okay.
So,
And each agency may have their own person in this role, but I know UCFS just added a vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, Dr. Walia? And I thought maybe either that person or somebody in a similar position within one of our organizations might be willing to just come and talk about what their work is in their
I love that.
organization and how, you know, simple it may be to incorporate some of the work they do into this group and the work of the city.
I think that's a good suggestion. Definitely noted.
Yeah, Patrick, that's exactly what I was going to say. Within this group, our agencies have some sort of a structure already starting to develop. I mean, most of us are in our nascent phases of DEI anyway. So I would definitely, I can make that happen. So if you can get a date, we can set that up.
Perfect. Other suggestions for speakers? I know we haven't seen Laura Dietrich or Norwich Public Schools for a while, but I would really like to see what's going on with the health equity section from Norwich Public Schools. So that might be someone that would be nice to have a guest speaker to, especially as we start to reflect on the things that we're doing. That's a nice segment of the population to be able to hear from.
In that same vein, I would suggest Jamie Bender. She's the assistant superintendent interim. But she comes to every meeting. She's so engaged. She understands the intricacies of the school district and how they're restructuring.
Sakaya is still on vacation,
Great.
which is why because she's out of office.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that's why she didn't join us today. But I will mention it. I have a meeting with them on Wednesday. I will remind them
Perfect.
that they need to have somebody come to this meeting.
Yeah, that would be great.
Is anybody from NFA? Have they been asked to attend or no?
No,
No, they weren't listed.
I always think of Leo Butler as an
Yeah.
option, but I don't know if that's every time I
It's a
think.
tricky time of the day too for him, I know.
yeah, no, in the original, and that's the other piece when we finish up. I don't want to jump around. To go back to whatever happened to what we had come up in
Yeah, the redlining.
the redlining.
It's been a
So
push.
right, so,
Okay.
but NFA was not on that
No.
initial
Okay.
invite.
Right.
That's,
And we just have to make sure that we're careful about our quorum too, because we are a pretty large committee right now, so we just want to make sure that we're
I just
careful.
thought to
about that.
invite them to a meeting to.
Oh, as a guest
introduce him.
speaker, I would
Oh,
love that. Yeah, I
Either
would
as
love
a
that.
guest speaker
I would
or
love that.
just to introduce him to our group and say,
Yeah.
if you'd like to come attend the meeting and just see.
I agree. That'd be
about the
great.
discussion.
Love to hear what's going on there.
Joe, I would reach out to him because they have made some changes at NFA and at least ask him, is there somebody in the same role of DEI?
Sure.
Because just because he's director of diversity of the student body,
Sure.
and if Faye made with the new superintendent, I know he's made some changes.
Okay, great.
So,
Other suggestions for guest speakers? All right, great. So I'll reach out to these individuals and we'll try to schedule them in some upcoming meetings. We're moving on to agenda item number 6, so subcommittee report out. So with the focus sort of changing or narrowing, our subcommittees are sort of more aligned with how we looked at the resolution beforehand, right? So how we sort of perceive those resolutions as individual action items. So we made committees to sort of support that. But if we look at our overall idea of creating a health equity plan, the committees sort of don't align. So I'm going to make a motion to reconfigure the subcommittees to fit our goal of creating a health equity plan within the year.
Seconded.
Melinda, do you need me to repeat that? Melinda?
Maybe just one more time for the record.
Okay, one more time. So I make the motion to reconfigure the subcommittees to fit our goal of creating a health equity plan within the year. I have a second.
So Joe, just to clarify, what's the year? How do you define year?
So when is our last meeting set up for this year?
Fiscal year, calendar year. or-
Fiscal, yeah, fiscal year, calendar year.
Calendar. year.
Calendar.
So it would be December. So it gives us,
Second, I second the motion.
perfect. So we've got seconds. Now open it up for discussion. Discussion.
Just that we, somehow we anchor in our April report and then our October report. So the April report, I would, since it's I believe it goes to the council and then it goes to the city manager. I don't know who, but it goes to somebody in the city that we explain what we're going to do, give them. And then at the October one, we at least start having the formation of a draft.
Yep. I think, April's when we start to talk about what we're doing and like how we're going about doing it. And then October we'll have sort of some drafts and stuff going on. Any other discussions about this, reconfiguring the subcommittees? Okay, we'll bring it to a vote. I'll do it by roll call. So Michael Steinmetz representing Generations,
Agree.
Dr. McLean,
Agreed.
Dr. Qureshi,
Agree.
Dr. Walia,
Yes.
Police Chief Daly,
Yes.
Patrick McCormick,
Agreed.
Kathy Special,
Agree.
Bridget Marks,
Yes.
Yes.
Sheila Hayes, Kate,
Aye.
and Josie Zell, aye. Are you
She's a
voting?
public member.
Oh, public-
Well, I mean, she's
Voting
She's not
member?
here as
not a voting member.
That's, I skipped, but I just didn't, I want to make sure I wasn't being rude. All right, so, motion passes unanimously. So we will move forward with reconfiguring the subcommittees. Obviously I will be involved. I will take anyone who wants to volunteer on the, subcommittee reconfiguring. You don't all have to jump now, but if you want to email me later on, that is fine. Otherwise, you trust me implicitly. So we'll say that.
I can sit with you, Pat.
Perfect, Dr. Walia. I'll schedule some time for you and I.
Yeah.
And anyone else who is interested.
Joe, I can't speak for Missy, but maybe she'll want to participate.
Perhaps I'll reach out to her. I'll say you sent the invite.
Perfect.
All right, I should probably be on it just as city
Thank you.
representation.
Perfect. All right. So we've got 4. I'm comfortable with that. Excellent. All right. So we're now moving on to subcommittee report outs, which we don't have to do anymore because we're reconfiguring the committees. So I would like to take this time to discuss these sort of overarching buckets or categories with which we're going to sort of outline the equity plan. So, when Sheila was speaking, she mentioned things like trainings, programs. This is basically how are we going to communicate the wonderful work that we are doing inside our own individual organizations in an organized way within the plan. So I will entertain ideas from individuals on what we should be looking at. Keep in mind, these are things that you will be responsible for reporting out for your organization. So they should be things that, one, have value, work within our diversity, equity, inclusion space, obviously, and that is accessible. And to Patrick's point, if we have data that is a proven track record, that's going to be really important for programs and how we sort of request funding in the future for said programs through that equity plan. that makes sense. So thinking data, thinking no spots, but open it up to discussion.
Just going back to what Sheila was saying about, the ethics training, it's the same for me as it was for you. Where our department a few years ago was asked to complete the ethics training, and it's not a reflection on ethics training, but it's more to say, we're sort of I've always thought of us and Otis similar, that we're not part of the city, yet we are part of the city.
Right.
We get funded by the city. We go to department head meetings when we're asked, and I've always thought we should try to align at least some of the basic expectations for training, at least of our board members, especially the ones from the city. But I think there's ways where we can incorporate some of the training and some of the expectations of my board or my staff that aligns with what the city is expecting of the other boards and of their staff members.
Yeah.
So maybe just making sure that we share those opportunities with other agencies in the area.
Yeah.
Opening up things like training and making it available to as many Norwich serving agencies as possible, so we all take advantage of it. Because I know in the past they've talked about, well, are you part of KERMA? Are you part of CCM? Are you like, well, no, well, then you can't really take part in the training. And I'm like, but if everybody in the city is going to have it, I'd like my staff to have it too, that kind of thing. So, just looking for opportunities to incorporate people that may not otherwise have that training available to them, or weren't even aware that that training is something that the city would encourage.
Yeah.
So how that, I think the flow of information would go both ways.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would also love to hear what we're doing for trainings. Like I know with FQHCs and with us in particular, we have lots and lots of trainings around, health disparities, health equity, everything from, gender and sexuality to ethics. So, that would be really interesting just to see how the three of us are aligned. I really know that we're pretty close, but also seeing how that works with the things that you do. I imagine that, Chief Daly has a number of different trainings that they're going through too, in terms of some of
And
that.
can
So
include things like hiring strategies, like if the city wants to see a workforce that is, X% part of the community, whatever the case may be, and I don't meet that expectation, I think it would be good for the city to share with me that they want us to reflect the community in the same way they're expecting their own departments to reflect the community, or, if they're applying for funding, they should ask me, well, how can you be part of this opportunity, or, some of those type of back and forth conversations can happen.
So I'm hearing hiring strategies as another category, right? Because we'd want to be able to report that out from all of us individually.
Yeah, I think we've always written on our application, that we're, we put the standard statements, but I'd like to be able to have data to back up that we attempt to hire people of all types.
Well, and I know with our chip, for example, like our China, one of our goals is to hire individuals who have a DEI background and that kind of clinical expertise. So that's one of our goals moving forward for our community health improvement plan. So that would be very interesting to your point. What's the difference between writing something at the bottom of the page? What is your action? What is your HR department doing to be able to do those sorts of processes?
And my word was, how are they demonstrating?
Right. Okay.
Because it's one thing to say that's what the city's policy is. Bridget, she knows this all too well. It's another thing to demonstrate that you are at least trying to achieve it.
And maybe since we don't have a DEI vice president, because I only have 14 people in my office, maybe one of the other agencies has that person and would share them with me to do some training.
Right.
Or maybe they would review my job applications for me through the HR department, or whatever resource they could be to help me meet that requirement.
But ultimately, you could report on what you're doing in your organization right now with these things, even if it's not a lot, right? We're not saying that if you report out on these things, that's going to, well, you're not doing this or that. This is just reality, right? So what are we doing? Who has best case scenarios here? Who has standard practice? And I think maybe HR is the overriding sort of category, and underneath that are things like training, hiring strategy. Do you have other recommendations for specifics underneath the HR bucket that we would want to report out as individual organizations?
Well, I can tell you what we're doing, here, like we establish teams for our police department and fire department. HR sits in on every interview that we have. We have a diversity internship program through NFA where we hire kids in the summer, hoping that, they'll either come back or, spread the word that the city's not a bad place to work.
Right.
So those are some of our things that we're doing.
What about like overarching sort of goals, like things that we should report on? Like, what would you want to know from a Hartford healthcare side or from like a generation side, or like in order to,
With regard to recruitment or?
with regard to how HR is aligned with DEI work, health equity, what we're doing from our organizations that could better inform the city's HR department?
I'm not sure right now.
But I think those are the questions that we're asking each other, right?
I think training and hiring practices really a great start for HR. I mean,
Good.
I don't know that any of the other areas in HR would touch on that.
Okay.
Necessarily. I mean, there's like, of course, like labor market agreement, negotiation stuff, disciplinary stuff.
I mean, we do, new employee orientation, which includes sexual harassment, workplace violence, bullying, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's all training and that
So that would
training
undergo
bucket
training
too.
bucket.
Yeah.
All right, so sounds like HR is definitely one that we would focus on. Other ideas, I know we won't get to all of them today, but after we leave today, I would really like for folks to be able to think about some of these categories, because I want to start pulling it together and having individuals get some of this report out together.
Well, then community engagement has to go on there. I'm already doing it. Check, check.
Perfect. Community engagement. I don't think anyone on this call wouldn't have trouble reporting on how they do community engagement, specifically through that DEIB lens. So
Yeah, best practices on community
best
engagement,
practice.
especially with a focus on underserved population,
Yes.
not just low hanging fruit here. We got to get the people that are not getting what we're putting out.
Agree.
And if I can expand that,
Sure.
so we start to use some of the additional language and disproportionately impacted areas in the city. Is that a line? Yeah. Can I also walk down, and this is more from on the health care side, and I'm going to give the specific, but I'm not trying to make the category specific. I just have to use it as an example.
Sure.
So it's been written about it. TV personality on MSNBC, a young woman of color who went through a pregnancy. The whole pregnancy issue when it comes to women of color, and the role that doulas are now playing, and the emphasis to have doulas a part of that. So I use that as the example of saying that there are still health care inequities and healthcare practices that are still happening, that are having a grave and deep impact, especially on women of color.
Agree.
And how do those, I don't know what bucket that you categorize, put that in, but I think we've moved away from identifying there are specific areas that are impacting especially women of color, but just more specifically kids of color, men of color, and especially I talk about the minister just passing away. And
I think that ties into the resource deserts that I was talking to too. I worked on a Black infant mortality study for the University of Wisconsin when I was an OBGYN. And that was the overarching trend is education desert, food desert, social service desert. That's where we were seeing clusters of the highest rates of Black infant mortality. So I think maybe resource sharing, identification, going back to Kathy's point about having some sort of digital hub to get the work we all do out, and inform people about it.
So maybe what we can report on is how we're all addressing healthcare inequities or just inequities in our daily business. Is that something that would be reportable? How we do, how we're working on
Specific
it? Specific to
to,
healthcare,
well, no, specific to people of color,
correct?
not just there's not just the healthcare inequity, but specific to people of color.
I mean, so
Because and I say that because it is not, so many times it gets thrown out, well, it's because they're, you know, they can't afford proper health care, they can't afford this. It's not an economical, or it's not an economical or social issue, because you're talking about women or people of color who are making darn good money.
Right.
And they're still having these health inequities, and they're still experiencing the same thing as somebody who we keep saying it's because of their economic situation. And it's not true.
and I think, you know, this could also be applicable to many places. So if I think about even the library, for example, it's access, right? How are we working on getting individuals access who might not have smartphones, might not have minutes on their phones, might not have transportation? Like, we're all working on those social determinants of health aspects. So this would be the category where we would report out on that. What are we doing specifically for those kinds of things? And it could be from a clinical standpoint, those of us who are involved in the clinical work, but it could also be from that social determinants of health standpoint. It could be from a historical. Does that seem like that's something everyone could report out on comfortably? All right, we've got 2 buckets.
I think you have 3. Community engagement, HR.
Oh, community engagement. I'm sorry,
Forgot
Kate.
all about me.
Sorry, I'm sorry,
Thanks,
Kate.
Sheila.
Yeah. How can I forget? It's so near and dear to my heart. All right, so we have 3, so that's
At
good.
least 3, yes.
Other ideas for large categories for reporting out while we sit around the table? I know it's a new idea, but just strike while the iron is hot.
I think there has to be a policy development advocacy component, and that may fall under the same somewhat of the category, but you know, I think each year we should make an effort to review policies that are impacting our community and advocate for either new policies or refining some of the policies to make them more appropriate.
I'll be honest, from my standpoint, that might be hard for me to gather. I'll try to do that, but I'm not sure.
I think that's really where our state representatives and those folks can come to us and give us an annual update. Even that could be part of the, you know, local and state legislation that's impacting our community, and what we as, just to make us aware as agencies that this legislation is being followed, or if we want to propose legislation, that we inform the group that our agency is proposing legislation in this area. Does anybody have any input? Let me get the details.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it, a policy arm of things. I think that makes sense. I mean, that will help guide right back into the plan, which is our ultimate deliverable, right? Policy.
So what policies have you reviewed recently that you had to change? What policies have you developed to specifically affect, you know, inequities, right? To work within the DEI space? Those are things that we would report out on specifically.
Well, and what's your policy on policy evaluation too? I mean, right?
Do you have it? Yeah, exactly. Are we doing that? What
Yeah,
lens do we
Yeah.
look at?
How are we going to measure? How are we going to measure MVP?
Yeah, I wonder about that. Interesting.
Well,
Okay.
I think that needs to be, I think we need to give some recommendations.
Right.
Because, and people who work for the city may not know this, but there are some departments, the way they report, how they're measuring their goals and what they're achieving, I think it's a bunch of garbage. They're not telling us anything to justify why we are spending the money that we're spending. Not saying that they're not doing good work, but somebody has allowed them to say, this is how you measure and justify what you're doing. And it's it's garbage.
Mm.
You know, you just putting down.
So I
So
wonder
that
if policy and data
actually-
gathering kind of go together hand in hand.
Yeah,
That's kind of
she'll
where I
say
was looking.
quarterly reporting. That's
Yeah.
the first thing you thought of. I mean, when I became department head, we aligned the data we're capturing with the city goals as outlined by council.
And
So-
I'm sure you guys have tons of processes for how you
But it's interesting
gather
that
your
you bring it
data.
up because I think there's still expectation of some of our municipal officials and municipalities and what have you, where we've done very broad, thorough statistical
Mhm.
analysis of our work and we get, can you just tell us how many food inspections and septic inspections you do? Like, we don't want.
Had that
physical-
experience too.
Yeah.
Don't tell us so much data.
But remember, this
Yeah.
is our, like, as subject
So
matter
it
experts,
allows
we
me to be
say,
able to say, well, no, I share it with
right.
equity committee and I share it
Right,
with these other
right.
groups and. we-
And moving forward, this is what we think is really pertinent and important,
Right.
right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. So I'll put policy sort of data gathering. That could be for how we report out on grants. That could be for how we are reporting out or even collecting information from our community engagement. That could be also how we're tracking our trainings in HR. So that sort of sits with all of the rest of our categories that we're looking at. That makes sense. All right, it's 3:28, so this is a very fruitful discussion, but I don't want to hold people past time. Moving forward, what I would really encourage everyone is to think of, Melinda will send out minutes, and then think of things that you can report out for some of these categories here, and most importantly, what is missing. If we're going to write a health equity plan for the city, what other categories do we need to have there that we should report out on? In the meantime, we will meet to reconfigure subcommittees, and then hopefully we will have these buckets to start reporting out on by the next meeting because our turnaround is kind of tight. So can I get a motion? Oh,
Can we
sorry.
go back to the redlining?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Take
Yeah.
that document because.
I probably have it. I don't know what happened to it. We submitted it to city clerk's office multiple times.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten anything back.
But yeah, so can you help?
Well, I'm going to suggest before I walk into it, can you reach out to John Solomon, who's the city manager? Because I believe we prepared it for him to submit.
Oh,
I
okay.
believe that's who.
So maybe getting the health equity committee redlining on agenda setting.
Right,
Yes.
if
Okay.
he could get it, because agenda
Please,
setting is
please
next
do that.
Monday.
Yes, please. Let's do
I mean,
No, it's today
you're,
at 2:30,
you're saying please,
sorry.
please, like I have.
that.
Now, but even if it doesn't get on the one for Tuesday, if it gets on the one this month, you know, if it gets on the one for February, I'm just saying, we've done it, I have not seen it come through.
Right.
So-
All right, I'll do what I can and ask the people. Okay.
All right, can I
Now you
entertain?
can have a motion to.
I so moved.
Okay,
Second.
all right. Can we just do all like show of hands or eyes? So I
No,
don't
you
have
have
to
to
roll
do it
call?
now,
All right,
do after.
roll call, here we go.
Thank you.
Dr. Qureshi,
Yes.
Dr. McLean,
Yes.
Dr. Walia,
Yes.
Chief Police Daly,
Yes. Yes.
Michael Steinmetz,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes, and here's something in the chat. just so you know.
Kathy,
Yes.
Yes.
Bridget, Sheila,
Yes. Oh,
Kate,
Yes, I.
Joe, I. Motion passed unanimously. All of you have a wonderful rest of your Monday and a great week, and we will talk to each other soon. Bye-bye.
thank you.
All right.